Steven is asking whether Lincoln Riley left this program in better shape than what he inherited.
It's a good question. I mean, he was given the keys to a very good setup, both on the offense and defensive side, more particularly on the offensive side. When he joined Oklahoma, I would say slightly worse, and part of it has to do with the timing on who has either elected to transfer and elected to leave. From a decommitment 2022 perspective. But I think when you look at, we talked about this a fair amount of times, but the downward trajectory that Oklahoma has been in each year has been just in terms of not necessarily talking about Big 12 championships, but mostly talking about just in terms of what Oklahoma has done on the national stage. Very competitive with Georgia. Should have won that game. Didn't win the game, and then progressively Alabama, and then LSU the next 2 years wasn't quite as good, obviously, and then the last 2 years did not make the Big 12 championship game, and then wasn't even a participant this year. So I think the downward trajectory plus some of that, I would say slightly worse than he found it.
That LSU game in particular was tough to watch. I don't have a rooting interest in these games, and just watching that game and feeling for a fan base and feeling for everyone connected to Oklahoma, it just obviously wasn't competitive at all. Now, that was a great LSU team, maybe an all-time great team. And, they had that game gone maybe closer to what the Clemson game was that LSU performed the next week in the national championship game, in which, if you look at the final score, it looks like LSU blew out Clemson as well. They beat them 42-25, but it was a 28-25 game with 10 minutes left in the game. It was a really good game, and then LSU just put on the gas and pulled away. I just had that sense in watching the athletes on the field and watching just the first few drives of that Oklahoma LSU game that, it was going to be brutal.
Yeah, it was, and I think Mark, ushering Oklahoma into the SEC, whether it's whenever it is next year, the year after, I think one of the things that seems to be very consistent across the board is really the level of athlete that that Oklahoma has out there across the board. It's not. I think mostly on the defensive side of the ball, maybe even more so on the back end on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that's going to be interesting, and I think you're going to see. Which Jerry Schmidt, we didn't really get into the specifics, but Jerry Schmidt has been brought over from Texas A&M, is going to be Oklahoma's new strength and conditioning coach. Russell Dennison, who's the assistant there, is coming over as well as the assistant. So a lot of familiarity within the Oklahoma program was with Oklahoma and Bob Stoops from 1998 to 2017. Um, left to go to Texas A&M. I think more reason is because Riley didn't really love his style the way he was. He's very much a no nonsense, extremely tough, kind of an old school type of coach from a strength and conditioning perspective. So I think that's going to be invaluable for Oklahoma, just with him coming back. So transforming these kids' bodies into the way that Oklahoma needs to be competitive in this going to the SEC is going to be as critical as anything else, with from a coaching perspective as well.